Hey, my name's Austin Hull. I had the privilege of making a Cubase 15 demo project, so in this video I want to walk you through the demo project that I made, show you everything that's going on in it, show you some of the new features of Cubase 15 and how I use them, and kind of break it all down for you because there is a lot happening. So if you haven't already downloaded it, all you need to do is go to the Steinberg download assistant and download the Cubase 15 project from me, Austin Hull, and when you open it, it should look a little bit like this. I'll kind of walk you through the track layout and then we'll dive into the really specific stuff. So up here, you're going to find an arranger track where you can kind of just experiment with the arrangement. If you've never used this before, it's a really cool tool when you're writing. You can essentially pop in whatever you have going on, so your verse, your pre-chorus, your chorus, and what you can do is you can kind of start to rearrange these. So if you want to audition and preview what your song would sound like with a slightly different structure, you can do that. So I have the arranger track up top. I also have a tempo track up top and a marker track that we're not actually utilizing because we have the arranger kind of doing our marker. But that's all kind of pinned to the top. So even as I scroll up and down, I've got that in its own little section up here. So that's what the top of the project looks like. The next thing that you're going to find are all of these color coordinated folders. So we have our drums, we have effects tracks, we have bass, we have synths, we have guitars, we have vocals, and then we have harmonies. Then down here, we have our sends and effects chains. Down here, we have our kind of main master group tracks. And then we go into our master bus down here called master bus automation. So inside of every single color coordinated folder, there's going to be a group track to where I can actually process things on a group level. I can do things like volume automation on a group level. If I want to, add drum bus compression, I'm doing all of that on this group track. So group main drums or, for guitar, group electric guitars. So as you run through, this is kind of the template that I use whenever I'm producing, but I figured I would just show you around so you don't get lost because we have a lot to cover in this video. So the first thing that I kind of want to start with is the drum sound. The main thing that we're doing in this song is using Groove Agent. There is a Groove Agent 6 update. And what I did is kind of made my own kit by going into the sample browser over here and just kind of looking through some of the samples that Cubase had to offer. And I dragged in multi-samples and I was able to kind of divide that between velocity. So as I play the kick, you can see that we have 5 different samples: velocity 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Same thing with snare. And we're doing that kind of across the board. So that's what my Groove Agent kit looks like. If you want to go into the demo project and save this preset, you totally can. This is not a stock drum from them, but it's using all Cubase sounds and samples. But the one thing that I like to do when I use Groove Agent is you can right click on something and you can hit Assign Output. And essentially, if you hit this drop-down menu, it's going to let you kind of mix every single output as its own element. So I have a kick drum, a snare drum, a tom drum, all being operated with one instance of Groove Agent. And on top of every single layer, I'm doing quite a bit of mixing. So if we take off my drum bus, if we go into here, we'll kind of take it step by step, layer by layer, and I'll show you some of the processing, and then we'll move on to something else. But for right now, if we look at our kick drum, this is what it sounds like with nothing on it. So I wanted to use something like an EQ P1A just to add a little bit of low end, add a little bit of high end, and kind of control some of the mids. Makes it a little bit punchier. Without. Same thing with a tube compressor, just adding a fast attack and then a slower release, just kind of making this gel a little bit more, and I'm adding quite a bit of drive. Giving it a little bit of extra punch and transient. I'm also using the stereo enhancer, and one thing that I wanted to do for this, since it is kind of an indie rock, indie pop genre, is I wanted the drums to be a little bit more centered. So there's a little bit of room baked into all of these samples. So I added something like a stereo enhancer to kind of cut that down. And then I'm just adding a frequency to do a little bit of EQ. All of these are going to change no matter what samples that you use. So I'm not going to get into my really, really specific parameters, but just kind of tightening it up. And then it was a little bit clicky in my mix, so I'm just darkening it here with my channel EQ. We can move on to the snare. We're kind of doing something really similar where the snare sounded great immediately, but I wanted to add magneto just to add a little bit of saturation. I wanted it to kind of pop. Gives me that nice sizzly top end by dragging that saturation all the way up. And then as I add the tube compressor, different parameters than we had for the kick, but it's kind of doing the same thing, adding a lot of pop and drive. And then the next thing is just doing some EQ. It got a little bit bright with all of the compression and saturation, so I'm just controlling some of the mids, adding a little bit of that body back. I wanted it to be that thumpier, deader snare. And then we're just bringing it all in again with the stereo width from the stereo enhancer. And we kind of just do that for every drum element. So I'll kind of take you through stereo enhancer, stereo enhancer, stereo enhancer, just kind of bringing these toms in a little bit. There's not too much happening on all of these. There's a little bit of EQ happening on some of them. But other than that, it's really just the stereo enhance. So I'm going to go ahead and engage everything so you can hear what the drums are sounding like. That's the drums with the entire mix. Now if I go to my drum bus, I can add my quadrifuzz. It's going to give me a little bit of extra saturation, especially in the mid-range. Adding quite a bit of drive to those upper mids and those mids, and I have the mix right around 80%. And then I am adding the EQ M5, basically a really nice kind of mid-range EQ. And these are things that just kind of help the drums come to the front of a mix. If you look at these two little guys down here, the amp simulator and the room effects, we're just automating those for the intro. So we can basically have this like crushed radio effect. If I drag these in, you'll kind of see what they're doing. But it's essentially a really, really short room reverb and kind of this kitchen radio preset from the amp simulator. Automate off. And we just do that to give us a nice little fun intro. So that's pretty much it for the main drums. The only other things that we have are, we have this little hi-hat layer that I'm using the sequencer for, where I'm essentially just kind of giving myself a quarter note, or I'm sorry, an eighth note. And it's kind of just supplementing that main hi-hat that we have. Then I'm just layering in extra crash hits on the one. One pan left, one pan right, kind of naturally. And then we have these tambourines under here and the shaker. We're using that pattern sequencer for the shaker as well. As you can see, the velocities down here. I like that because all I have to do is create it one time and then I can just drag it as much or as little as I need to. And I don't have to worry about copying and pasting it. So I used a lot of the sequencer in this. But yeah, that's kind of the main drum arrangement. Very simple. So let's go on to something like the bass down here. We have this little bass preset out of Halion Sonic. It is called the Precision Flat Wound. And without anything on it, it sounds a little bit like this. Nice little P bass. And I wanted to sidechain this to the kick. So I have a compressor down here. As you can see, we have the sidechain triggered. And so every time that the kick hits over here, it's going to duck that bass just a hair. Just making some room for that kick in the mix. I always use a stock compressor when I'm sidechaining things. It's just super easy to work with. And then for the actual bass tone, we're using the Bass Amp VST. And we are using some pre-effects. We have the DI driver and the compressor. When you go into the amps, we are using what looks to be like the valve amp over here. Here are the settings. If you want to copy this, you can go into here and you can save your presets as well. And then we are just using the 8x10 cab. For post effects, we just have the enhancer kind of doing a little bit of extra, pop. Microphones, I believe we're just using this little ribbon mic right here, this little 409 and then 121. And then there's our configuration. And on the master, I actually don't have anything on except for the master. I had this EQ, but I took it off at the very, very end. So here's what it sounds like. I'm adding quite a bit of drive, I'm adding some mid-range, and then we're kind of just cleaning it up with this frequency right here. We are layering that bass up with one extra little element down here. We're layering it with this little upright bass. This is also out of Halion Sonic. It's called the GM033 acoustic bass. And the main thing that we're doing on this is we have effects modulator that's kind of just giving us a quarter note or a half note volume ramp. It's basically just adding a little bit of pick attack. So when we layer that with the drums, we get this really nice kind of full low end. But let's get into where things get really, really interesting. And this is a new feature of Cubase 15 that I'm actually really loving. This is the melodic sequencer. So we've had the pattern sequencer in Cubase for a minute, but They have a melodic sequencer now, so if you want to write out things like chord progressions or arpeggios, it is really, really easy to do so in this. So I have two different versions of my melody. I have version 1 and I have version 2. And essentially all I'm doing is drawing in the melody that I want, and then you can see the velocity down here. And the cool thing about this is you can actually go in and you can just start to kind of generate random variations. So there's this variation knob. You can change the density. You can add variation with entire chords or just with single little note melodies. All you really need to do is pop in your key, pop in if you want it mono or poly. You can kind of adjust your range to adjust where it's going to actually happen within the melodic scale. And then if you want to generate your steps, you can generate them with randomization. You can add shapes. And if you want to edit, you can add things like legato. You can add things like a resolution. But for right now, we just have this really, really simple melody in here. And this is basically just like a mellotron string out of Halion Sonic 7. Just repeating that, then on to version 2. And using that melodic sequencer is a great way to kind of just go in and write a melody that you might not write off the top of your head. So that's the first one that I did. And then I'm essentially just layering that with this extra little bell lead. This is out of Retrolog. This is Flows Like Water. And the cool thing is when you go to add a track and you add an instrument, if you select pattern event instead of MIDI event, you can just do that for every single lane, and then you can just copy and paste this over between different pattern events like you would for MIDI. It's super, super simple. We also have this extra little ambient pad right here. This is the Dark Crystals pad out of Halion Sonic. And we have the effects modulator on this, basically just adding a bit of like random variation with filtering, overdrive, and volume. It's kind of giving us this more granular sound that I think layers in really, really nicely. They're pretty far in the back of the mix, but when you add those three things together, you get a nice, real spacey pluck. And then if we go into this glass lounge that we have right here, this is just straight out of the Retrolog as well. It's literally the preset called Glass Lounge. And I'm essentially just drawing this in with MIDI, just like normal. This is kind of a normal MIDI pattern. Wanted to give you both options in the demo. We have one more little melody with the pattern event using a little vocoder preset out of Retrolog. And for this one, you can see it's a little bit different than this first one because what I'm doing is I'm actually extending some of these notes. So if you want, you can extend a note where it's not going to add a new transient, but it'll kind of just hold it. So if I were to shorten this and do it like this. However, I want this kind of specific note to actually hold out. But we can undo some of that over there. And now we get this. And what we're doing essentially right here, you see this little arrow? In the melodic event, this essentially means that this note back here is going to hold over to the one of the next measure. So it's holding right there, but it's not going to trigger that immediately at the start of the progression. So we're doing that. We have a little stutter synth over here. This is the aggressive saw plucks. And for this one, we're kind of just pedaling on a note. I wanted to give us some consistency in this melody. This will kind of mimic the bass line in the guitars that we'll talk about in a second. But the really fun layer about this synth arrangement is actually these strings down here. And I'm using the expression maps down here. And what I'm doing is I'm using the expression maps specifically with this library in Halion Sonic called the Iconica Sketch. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm playing a violin and I am just triggering it to kind of go between different pizzicatos, staccatos with things like key mapping. But then I'm also using this expression map here just to add a little bit of extra movement and modulation and realism. So you can see right here, we're kind of going between a spiccato and then a legato or a sustained. But we're adding this modulation in down here. This is essentially just going to kind of give you the intensity of that string bow. And it gives you something a lot more realistic than if you were to literally just go in and use, you know, a specific spiccato patch and then a specific legato patch and try to get them to mesh. If you can go in and you can do your key mapping, you can use things like these expression maps over here that, you know, are kind of really, really nice in Cubase, especially if you ever do scoring. I think you can just add quite a bit of dynamics to something like a synth arrangement or a key arrangement. So that's kind of everything that we have for the keys in the intro. If you hear that with the drums and the bass, you're getting something like this. For the guitars, we have quite a few guitars happening. We have these palm mutes over here that are very simple. They're just eighth note palm mutes that have this little preset on it. It's a flanger, an overdrive, and a compressor going into the British Custom. For the cabinet, we're just using that kind of matched cabinet. Post effects, nothing happening. Microphones, basically a condenser and a dynamic. Configuration, boom, master, only using the master level. And then you get something like this. We have 2 tracks of that guitar. One is panned 100% left, one is panned 100% right. That's going to give us some stereo width. And then we have this little lead line down here, again, tracked 100% left and right. And for this one, we've got a little bit more happening. On the pre-effects, we have a little gate just to cut out some noise. We have an overdrive. And for this one, we are using what looks to be like the deluxe amp. Moving on to the cabinet, we're just matching it. Post-effects, EQ, reverb, and flanger. Microphones, condenser, and dynamic. And then the master, we are using the EQ, and we're just adjusting master level right there. After that, we have a little bit of EQ, just kind of popping out certain notes, getting rid of some of that hiss and hum. And then we have a chorus right here that's essentially just adding this really slow, kind of washy chorus. And we're doing that to both sides. Other guitar layers, we have these little shimmery strums down here. We're actually only using a compressor. We're using no amp whatsoever. It's kind of just like a DI sound. Here's what it sounds like. But we are using the chorus in here. Width is at 100%. Rate is very, very, very slow. But the real key to this sound is we're using the shimmer plugin right here. And we're essentially adding an octave up, and we're mixing that in about 50%. Kind of adding a pad behind the guitar. I'll use that a lot in a mix if I want to just add something that's kind of shimmery. A lot of the time I'll add some kind of little strum on the one. This is just a DI sound. We're not even going into an amp. And for this, I just have the studio chorus. I have a ping pong delay giving us a little bit of stereo happening. And then I have the reverence doing kind of a long tunnel. The only other guitars that we have for this little intro section are these accents right here that I am using the studio chorus. And then I'm using the brand new pitch shifter plugin, so I'm tuning these down an entire octave. I have the formant driven up to 32%, and I have the drive driven up to 69%. Mix is at 50%. Here's what it sounds like with that if I don't have anything else. Kind of just trying to destroy the sound because as I go into the amp simulator, I'm adding a ton of gain. And then I'm just adding some reverb right here. It's the same one that we just had on those strums. And then a little bit of EQ just to tame this mid-range. And the main kind of, sauce to that sound is that studio chorus going into that brand new pitch shifter plugin. This thing is awesome for tuning things up an octave, down an octave. You can add things like harmonies. I love that they did add a drive and a distortion feature in here. This is something that I have really wanted in Cubase for a long time. There was some third-party stuff before this, but it's nice to kind of have it just baked right into Cubase. So that's kind of everything that we have for the intro arrangement. As we get into the verse, we're kind of simplifying things. The drums and the bass are basically doing the exact same thing, but we're adding this long pad here. And what we're doing with this long pad is essentially just pedaling on a note. This is the Chill Performer. I love the kind of randomness that it had to it. And then we're also doing a patterned melodic event with this like stutter synth right here. For that sound, we're just using the poly sequencer. Looks like this. We have some effect stuff happening. And I'm just using that to give us a little bit of kind of consistency. Then we have these verse keys. This is out of the writing room synth. This is brand new in Cubase 15. Nice little E-piano. Got a little bit of modulation, a little bit of chorus. And we're just doing a little bit of EQ on that. We also have this little sine lead down here. This is the vintage mini lead. We're kind of doing a call and response. And for this one, we are using the pitch shifter. We're going up an octave and we're mixing that in about 30%. Here's without it. Adds this nice like crushed digital higher octave behind it. Gives it a little bit of texture. And then we also have this little sine bell over here. This is from Pad Shop. No preset. I essentially just found like an E-piano in here, kind of added a little bit of granular synthesis, and then we're not processing that with literally any other stuff. Then we have this flute that comes in for the second half of the verse. I think this actually might be leading into like, yeah, the verse B. This flute over here, this is from the Halion Sonic Iconica sketch as well. And as you can see, most of the time that we're using that, I am also going in and doing things like expression mapping. So we're going from vibrato to legato. Swapping to staccato here just so we can have some short little notes. But that's giving us all of our synths and keys for the verse. The main things happening in this verse are these big guitar strums. We have the amp rack once again. This got a ton of use in this demo project. Flanger, compressor, deluxe. Basically what we kind of covered earlier. And then for the post effects, we just have a chorus, a tape delay, and a reverb. And we're doing the same thing on both sides. Without. So those are kind of just sustaining. Let's get to the really, really fun stuff for the guitars for this, and that's these little modulation hits. So I do have the VST amp rack once again, but what's happening on this is I'm actually using some of the modulators in Cubase to basically give me this really fun kind of like McGee effect, where essentially I put a modulator on this guitar and it's doing an envelope follower. So as I hit this guitar harder over here, you can see that this waveform is a little bit louder. What it's doing is it's going to drive the fuzz and the reverb inside of this actual VST. So this fuzz and reverb right here, they're going to be automated up as I strum that guitar harder. And it's giving you that almost like Ranger effects, crushed reverb that if you pluck really, really hard, you can get these really kind of dynamic, screamy, squelchy leads. And using the envelope follower and something like these modulators is a really, really good way to do that. We're doing the same thing on the right side. On the right side, we are doing the exact same parameters. We're just going to drive that reverb a little bit harder. But same thing, if I open this up, you'll kind of see it right here. Just giving those really hard, like 80s, almost like distorted surf rock hits. I think they add so much texture in the background. Then we get onto the verse B, where we just have this guitar. We've got a bit of compression. That's really it. And then some studio EQ, studio chorus, and reverb. We're kind of keeping this sound super DI. I didn't want anything that was like too guitar ampy for this. It's really nice and bright and plucky. That comes in when those flutes come in. And if we play everything together, we're starting to get this big kind of wall of sound. We can start to kind of talk about the vocals. There are some vocals in this verse. We had female vocals from an artist named Emia. She's got a lead going on right here. We are processing this with the vocal chain in Cubase. If you want to download these presets, this was kind of built off of the female warm plate. However, I definitely went in, changed some parameters. So we have a little bit of a filter, kind of cutting out high end and low end, a gate getting rid of background noise. We do have this just doing a little bit of pitch correction We have a de-esser. We have this dynamic filter kind of controlling low-end resonance and that kind of screechy high mid that especially comes out with female vocals. And then we're doing some compression and a bit of EQ.
65 on the dash, 100 miles from home.
Got an exciter, just kind of push it forward in the mix. Another compressor, a little bit of a dynamic filter, barely touching it. A little bit of EQ, barely touching it. Last little de-esser. I'll use the first one to target things like S's and T's, and then I'll use the last one to target things like that TH, that SH, and then I'm just using the imager just to give us a little bit of width.
65 on the dash, 100 miles from home.
I'm using frequency just to cut some of those like boxy little top end issues up there, and then one more de-esser just because it got really, really bright in the final mix. But I am sending it out to a couple different things. We have this vocal parallel widening. This is a send bus that I use a lot. I'm just using the cloner, doing this kind of chorus to add these extra voices in there.
65 on the dash, 100 miles from home.
Let me see if I can solo it for you. There we go. So that's just kind of being blended into that main vocal. We also have a long plate reverb right here. This is just the revelation. Here are the settings. Doing a little bit of EQ. And then the last thing is we have a delay down here. This is using the Studio Delay plugin. This plugin is absolutely insane. You can add tons of different patterns and variations. You can add modulation. You can add distortion. You can also do pitch stuff in this, very similar to like the Shimmer reverb. This is essentially the delay version of Shimmer, and I love this. Ever since I got this, I've been using this all of the time. Even when I have all of my tools at my disposal, this delay is super, super simple to use, and it can give you some really cool creative effects. So you can even pick if you want things to kind of be post or loop, and then you can choose different parameters. So you can choose like chorus, flanger, phaser, overdrive, bit crush, sample divide, long, medium, or short, and then pitch plus formant or just pitch. But here's what we're doing on this. And if we listen to all the vocals together, we've got that lead vocal happening, and then we've got a dub on the left and on the right. Same exact change, just a little bit quieter on the sides. But here's what it sounds like in the mix. We've got some harmonies over here. This is just all going to a harmony bus. I left each little track dry, and they're all going to this group.
Nowhere to go.
Bunch of compression, bunch of de-essing and chorus.
Nowhere to go.
And then that studio delay kind of doing its thing over here, and a reverb.
Nowhere to go.
We're keeping it super washy. I want them really, really ambient. That's kind of all that's happening through the verse. If we go into this little pre-chorus down here, we have a little guitar lead. We're doing that same kind of thing on the pre-chorus where we kind of do that little McGee crunch effect. And this one, you can see we're not really even doing the fuzz. We're mainly just automating that reverb. If I were to push this up, you'll kind of hear how different it gets. And that's what's really fun about having something that is dynamic and can be controlled with like an envelope follower. The modulators are really, really, really strong tools when it comes to that. In terms of the arrangement, there's really not much new stuff happening over here. We have this little loop that I found that was kind of fun. And I just have a chorus on it, giving us some modulation. And then I have this little step filter that's kind of giving us some movement. That's kind of it. Then we go into the vocals here. We're kind of doing a slightly different effect. For these, we're crushing these. So we have the vocal chain, and we're doing quite a bit of saturation now.
When you were mine, I just needed to leave behind all memories of art.
Really short reverb, really slappy delay. And we have a version panned about 70% left and right.
When you were mine, I just needed to leave behind all memories of our life.
Then we get into the chorus, which is a really, really, really big arrangement. We have all of the kind of synths that we talked about in the main version of that kind of intro chorus. But we're adding a couple new things. We're adding this little string lead down here, again, using that brand new melodic editor. using the 80 string ensemble, kind of giving us a really nice, kind of like retro Prophet synth. And then we have some pads. This is the chorus pad out of the writing room synths. This is one of my favorite expansions they've done for Halion Sonic. I've been using this a ton since I got it. I think it's just really nice for having like really big, lush sounds. So you add all of that in. We have this little organ. This one's coming out of Halion Sonic as well. We have this little E-piano that's just giving us a long little pluck. So all the synths come together. We add in the guitars that we talked about earlier. This little guy right here, this little glass ARP, this is a really cool example of using something like the melodic editor just to give me something that I probably wouldn't normally do. I just kind of let this randomly give me a variation, and it gave me this cool little like almost 70s psychedelic funky ARP. So if I play it, it's really fun. There's a lot of delay in this preset. There's a lot of reverb in this preset. And I'm kind of just letting this carry off and kind of be its own little like atmospheric element. The drums and the bass in the chorus are exactly the same as the intro. We're just automating some of the volumes up a little bit. But other than that, for our vocals, we have the main vocal up the front and then the dubs left and right.
Speeding the head and know we're fast, we're spinning in new.
But one thing that I wanted to add just to help these vocals kind of pop out of the mix was I added the vocal chain right here.
Speeding the head and know we're fast, we're spinning in neutral in the dust.
Basically doing a ton of saturation, a ton of compression, and then kind of adding that imager and that slap delay just to kind of give us almost this like parallel saturation chain, and we're just mixing that into the vocal to taste.
Speeding the head and know we're fast, we're spinning in neutral.
If I take it out in the mix, the vocals definitely kind of fall to the back a little bit.
Speeding the head and know we're fast, we're spinning in neutral in the dust. I gave him my heart, I want it back, I love.
We have some harmonies on that little harmony bus that we talked about earlier.
Head and know we're fast, neutral in the past. I want it back.
So we just kind of let that play out as a chorus, and then we have a nice little post-chorus over here where we add a couple new synths that haven't happened yet. We add this little buzzy lead right here. This is the vintage poly out of the retro log, and it's really ripping. We add some horns that, again, we kind of have that expression map, giving us some legato and staccato and giving us a little bit of variation. This is the Iconica sketch, of course. And then we have this little post-chorus lead right here that is the writing room synth noisy bass. Sometimes what I like to do for a lead sound is I'll use a bass sound and then just play it a few octaves up. And a lot of the time it'll have this cool like fuzz to it. And for this one, I'm just doing a little bit of modulation right here, and that's kind of controlling the vibrato. And that gives you pretty much every individual element of this entire demo project. The only other things to talk about would be if we come down here, we can go through and we can see if there's any processing on any of these buses, which I don't believe there are. And then we go to our master. Here we have a tube compressor that's just kind of giving us a little bit of compression, kind of tucking this entire mix in. We have a frequency over here that's basically just adding a little bit of top end information and mid information. We have a maximizer that's just giving us a little bit of extra like compression and limiting. We have the actual limiter right here that's just giving us our main, gain reduction. And then I'll always just kind of top it with a brick wall limiter just in case anything gets through this little guy. I don't want anything peaking, especially as we export. And this is where I'll also just kind of like detect my intersample clipping. And then once we listen without the master bus, have a little bit of clipping going on, not a huge deal once we add everything. So as you run through this Cubase demo project, definitely keep in mind some of the new things that you'll want to pay attention to, specifically like the melodic mode and the sequencer that we use quite a bit. We use a ton of the expression maps, so go in and kind of explore those. You can go in and save some of the presets that I've made for some of the synths and some of the drums. Check out some of the new drum kits that they do have in Group Agent. Check out some of the new stuff that they have in Halion. The writing synths are absolutely amazing, but again, I can't thank Cubase enough for allowing me to make a demo project for this. If you have any questions about my demo, let me know in the comments down below. I will come check on those as often as I possibly can. But I'll see you soon. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you can see all of the really cool tips and tricks and features of Cubase 15. Much love. Peace.